Welcome. I'm Douglas of HT Ellsworth, and this is Dying to Retire. Join me on my candid journey from my government job to the freedom of retirement. As the last of the baby boomers, I'm hanging up my federal badge and diving into what comes next. I will talk about what led to my decision on why it's time for me to retire, what I did right, and what mistakes I have made. I am not an HR expert or a financial advisor, so I have made a few mistakes. This podcast is a safe space for non-woke people, and while I try to keep everything somewhat above board, if it has to be said bluntly, it will be. Vegas rules apply, so let's get started. Now, if I haven't said it enough, I'm retiring this fall, soon after I turn 60. But to be perfectly honest, I'm not where I thought I would be at this age and at this stage of my life when I was a kid. I had different aspirations and career plans when I was younger, don't we all? And I'm sure some of you can relate. So, this is the topic of today's podcast, From Astronaut to Retiree. I'd love to hear your thoughts and responses, especially from those of you nearing retirement age. Are you doing what you imagined you would be doing 30, 40, or even 45 years ago? Now, I started working at 15. Yes, 15 is when I entered the workforce full time. So my journey in the workplace began quite early. Now, replace where I use I, me, or my with a corresponding pronoun for yourself. And I'm sorry for using the word pronoun, because this is a good thought exercise for yourself. And please, feel free to leave your comment below. I am generally interested in hearing your perspectives. Now, don't laugh. My childhood dream job was to be a sheriff or a cop in a small town. Think Andy Griffith and Mayberry, or even better, the first cop on a space station, because that's how it moved. I don't know where, but it went from Andy Griffin to a policeman on a space station. And I think Sean Connery did a movie on that, but long before that. Now, I've always been interested in law enforcement, not because of the authority or a gun in a holster on my hip, but because of the idea of helping the neighborhood and community. And I know that sounds awfully cheesy. However, I wanted to do this in outer space, and I vividly remember watching the first moon landing as a kid, which sparked my fascination with space and with science fiction. Now, looking back, the first inclination people my age would likely assume the release of the original Star Wars movies solidified my dream of being a cop on a space station or all things science fiction. However, after a lot of deep thought, I realize now that the dream started shortly after I learned to read. And as a child, I loved reading and rereading my dad's collection of Tom Swift books. They were books my dad read when he was a child and that he had inherited from his dad. I still remember them. Books like Tom Swift and His Amazing Flying Car, Tom Swift Among the Firefighters, and I still have the 1921 edition of the latter, which I know my grandfather read when he was a young child. Now, along with the Tom Swift series, I devoured the original Hardy Boys books by the original author and completely immersed myself in these classic books for boys, from Jules Verne to Alexander Dumas, all of which fueled my imagination. Unfortunately, the downside is, in my opinion, the new woke versions of these books now being pushed onto kids are just shit and not worth the paper or digital ink they are printed on. But I digress. The sad part in this dream of being a space sheriff was somewhat unrealistic. Why? Because later I discovered I got motion sickness when I flew or was on a boat. And thank God I found meclizine many years later, as Dramamine does not do shit for me, never did, never will. Next up, as a child, my earliest aspiration, like I said before, was to become a police officer, specifically a cop stationed on a space station. My fascination with law enforcement and space exploration likely influenced this. However, after serving a 4-year tour in the military, my aspirations shifted. If you think about that, it's kind of interesting. One pivotal factor that redirected my path was the letdown with the post Vietnam military leadership in the early 1980s, which, based on numerous observations when I was a junior enlisted officer, I felt was the unnecessary harsh treatment of junior enlisted personnel. Additionally, my eyesight, which is not the optimal for specific roles, made me have to reconsider a career in law enforcement. I just love having astigmatism. Not really. Now, after leaving the military, my primary focus became finding employment to support myself financially. So we're at that point. What your dream was as a child now has, hey, I need to eat. Now, this led me to take various jobs across different industries. Sorry, I didn't have a silver spoon. Wish I did. It'd have been really helpful. My turning point came in my early 30s when I decided to further my education. I went back to school, earned both a bachelor's and a master's, and during this time, I discovered I really like learning, which was very different from my high school. Yeah, strong D's still passing, right? I also liked business management, business math. Now, looking back, I can safely say my job aspirations, my dreams, like everyone else's, or like most people from my generation, went from a dream to the reality of having to pay bills. While it got better over time, reality's a bitch and dreams don't pay the bills. And I'm not being a negative Nancy. I'm just saying, while I'm not where I thought I was going to be when I was a kid, I'm happy where I am today. The short version is, despite the deviations from my childhood dreams, I never lost my love for law enforcement, never lost my love for science fiction, especially military science fiction. All right, moving on. But keep in mind, things change. So, unlike many who had a specific career path in mind early on in their lives, I can't say that I had a singularly focused career to this day. My professional journey in my optics has been quite eclectic. While I did not bounce from job to job like many of people do today, it was still diverse. It all started out with the military, where I worked military law enforcement. From there, I got out and transitioned to building supply sales. Then I jumped over to health insurance claims processing, which is still very interesting to this day, and then eventually dipped my toe into IT. However, the pivotal moment that redirected my career path occurred on 9/11. That day, I sent one of our technicians to the Pentagon to swap out some hard drives and power gauges. I think it was compact ProLiant 1830s. I still remember that. Ironically, I had instructed him, the tech, to be early because he had a bad habit of being late. And little did I know how significant that day would become. Just a side note, we were scrambling all day long trying to figure out what happened to him. But there's actually a happy ending. The son of a bitch was late again and got stuck on the parkway. So he was stuck on there, but he got to see the whole thing happen. So his life changed that day too. So, in the aftermath of 9/11, my path to the federal government practically wrote itself. I started as a contractor, leveraging my work in the military, and eventually became a staff Govy employee. And I'll share more about that another day. So, to me, being alive in relatively good shape, good health, and making it to retirement is the most significant milestone I could ever do. While my job was rewarding in many ways, it's important to note that job that I'm retiring from also comes with a thing called golden handcuffs. And for people who know what I'm talking about, know what I mean by golden handcuffs. So getting the time back, spending more time with family. These days, that time is now way more important to me than the 9 to 5. Next. To be fair, I am unsure if I achieved my childhood dreams in any form. However, I don't think it should matter. And I don't think it should matter to you either. Neither you nor I are going to be judged by our childhood dreams because of just that. They are childhood dreams. I know I did well in my federal job, as I did in all my jobs. However, like millions of other people, I at times likely had a version of imposter syndrome, especially during performance review season, which I will not miss. So there are no regrets because life, better yet, retirement life, is way too short to be filled with regrets. And as said on a recent Disney TV show, it is the way. And lastly, my vision of retirement when I was a kid definitely differs from today. I think all kids, or at least a lot of them, because when we are kids, do not understand or appreciate what money really means, think we were going to be some type of millionaire. However, we all also wanted a big house, but now we realize a big house is a bitch to maintain. It costs a lot of money and it's a lot to clean. So that's why downsizing is a goal in retirement. Now, doing this podcast, a hobby I enjoy, is an activity that I will continue to do in retirement. It is one of those things I plan to stay busy and learn new things, such as video and audio editing or getting better at speaking, be it here in the Socialist Republic of Montgomery County, Maryland, or when my wife and I finally moved to Guatemala. So there you have it, folks. A candid look at my childhood dreams of being a cop in outer space that took some wild detours before I found my path. But you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way. Because at the end of the day, it's not checking off some fantasy I had as a kid, but it's about embracing the twists and turns and learning from the highs and lows. And who knows, maybe in the next chapter, I'll finally get to live out those space cop dreams, this time without the motion sickness. Either way, I'm just grateful I made it this far with good health and great stories to share. So keep those childhood dreams alive, but when looking back, don't be disappointed that they didn't evolve, they didn't happen. We are too old and ain't got time for that shit. Really, we ain't got time. We're old now. So, in my optics, the most important lesson is while we can look back and hammer ourselves for this, that, and the other thing that we didn't do or should have done, don't, but do. Never stop exploring, never stop learning, and never stop growing. I'll be right here doing just that. Maybe with a spacesuit with a 10-star for old time's sakes. Let me know your thoughts and keep reaching for the stars. Just saying. That's it for today. Curious, concerned, or just want to chat? I'm all ears. Reach out at dyingtoretirepodcast@gmail.com. And if you find yourself nodding along or you just enjoy the ride, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Hasta luego.